Welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good. Our guest for this episode is Will Baggett, an award-winning major events professional, former strength coach, and dynamic speaker. Will's helped produce events such as the Super Bowl, Final Four, and a host of college football bowl games. Over a 6-year coaching career, he helped over 19 NFL draft picks, as well as 2 first-round picks. His first book, The Blueprints for a Successful Career, was released to widespread acclaim and has now been added to the curriculum at 6 nationally accredited universities. In this part of my conversation with Will, we go over phase 2 and phase 3 of building a successful career, which is all about cultivating the right environment and reaping the rewards. Will discusses the importance of making leaders look good and realizing your brand is what will precede you, position you, and protect you if developed the right way. He also discusses how being connected to influential leaders in your industry will help your career immensely and what it means to jersey swap with prominent individuals. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we engage with esteemed thought leaders and explore research-backed strategies and techniques that empower leaders at every level to achieve meaningful results that drive lasting change. Let's move now to part 2 or phase 2 of this, and this is around the cultivation, maintaining an environment through the cultivation of good habits. And the first part of this is looking out or seeking resources to help build your career capital. And you give a great story in the book with Candace Walsh, how she kind of did it in a adjacent field.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those biggest things where you got to figure out what the gaps are and what the holes are because we can always get better. Things can always be improved. And I think if you just accept the status quo, that's all you're going to get. And so when she saw a gap in the organization where, hey, we do a lot of sports psychology and we try to drop home these messages. So what can I do? I can go learn graphic design and we can put these impactful messages on the TV screens. And so they're hearing it verbally, they're gonna get it, they're gonna hear it, they're gonna feel it, they're gonna touch it, it's gonna be in their iPads and things like that. Also gonna see it because sometimes, especially from a standpoint of what I do as speakers, you have to understand people learn differently. Some people may get it as soon as they hear it. Some people need to hear it multiple times. Some people are auditory listeners or learners. So you have to be able to create an environment where you are understanding and attacking and implementing different learning styles for your people. Because if you apply a one size fits all approach, you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of robots who are not innovative, who are not bringing good ideas, who don't feel psychologically safe because they're going to feel like, oh, there's only one way to do it. We've always done it this way, and that's the biggest thing that kills a organization. We've always done it this way, and so I just saw how she did that and what it added to our environment and how it added to our presentation, and it made us just look so much better from how we presented ourselves standpoint. And so I think when people look at you, you have, first impressions. First 7 seconds is typically when a first impression is made. And when you go into those conversations, you bring a lot with you. People are looking at you and they're evaluating you based on how you treat yourself. And so by us treating our organization and treating everything that we did with the right respect it deserved and doing things to continue to be better and be innovative, the student athletes picked up on that. They're like, okay, they're practicing what they preach. They talk about getting to the next level. Well, that looks different than it did last week. They're still hot. They're still trying to get better. And so I think that kind of mindset can permeate your entire organization when people can see that you're actually practicing what you preach and not just some kind of top-down management where you're spewing out, mission statements and stuff, but you have no meat to your bones. So that was a huge thing I learned from her.
And when you start your career, when you're trying to build up and cultivate those great habits like Candace Walsh, you may need to go outside the scope of what a normal job description looks like within your company. You can also then maybe voluntarily immerse yourself into someone else's fire because that gets you comfortable in knowing what they're doing as well. So it's looking for those adjacent possible opportunities to try to find those differentiated skills that make you more valuable. But in the end, when you're starting out, and I think this message right here is lost on a lot of new leaders, is you want to make your leader look good. You don't want to try to sabotage them. You don't want to try to upstage them. Your team and your leader, your goal should be making them look better.
Absolutely, no question about it. And that's the pride thing, right? That's just a pride thing to where these people have earned the right to be in the positions they are. I know it doesn't seem like it because you weren't there when they were shooting in the gym or when they were building their career. But in order for you to get what you want, you got to help people get what they want. That's just a principle that I've always kind of believed. It's not anything that's biblical, but I found it to be true, right? When you get what you give in so many ways. And so when you're kind of in that position to make your leader look good and prepare them well, right, that gives them a sense of trust. They let their guard down and they begin to share more things with you. Like when I was at CFP, I made my boss look so good that basically he's opening the books to me. He's telling me how everything works, right? I'm looking at budget worth over, 10, 20, $30 million. And I'm seeing it. I never been exposed to that before, right? But it was all about because I took care of X. He's like, okay, let me tell you why. And for me, I've always been on this side of I want to see how things work, right? And so how can I build enough trust for you to kind of take me behind the curtain so I can understand, like, oh, okay, so this influences that, that influences this influences that. And so if we don't take care of this is going to be off. This person's not going to have what she needs to do her job effectively. And so that really helped, a lot to see, that behind the scenes. But it comes with a lot of trust. And I'm 28, 29 years old, getting these opportunities and this exposure, right? Whereas it would have been reserved for someone that's far, far my senior, right? And so I just took a lot of pride in that. And also being well read enough when I talk about other resources, whether it's podcasts, whether it's, information is everywhere. Information is ubiquitous. It's the knowledge, it's the desire to acquire knowledge that is lacking, right? You can find information anywhere, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, articles, whatever, whatever you want to find it, wherever you want to find it. But people don't want to learn anymore. They want to hear the things that makes them feel good on the inside and that could help them skip a step really quick or get rich quick. But everything I've ever heard about getting wealthy is the quickest way to get rich is slow, right? And gradual. And that's what I think is the most important thing. And so making people look good around you, absolutely critical because it just shows a level of selflessness that is lacking. And it's a lot of lost art these days, honestly.
Well, and even if you don't get credited for that specific feat, the team you represent will be held in high regard because your first goal is to try to become associated with sustained high performance before you attempt to blaze your own trail. And I love the little adage, the statement that you give is allow your leader to excel by being excellent in yourself, which, like you said, with people's egos, with them wanting to skip steps, they don't want to put in the time. But usually, by putting in the time, getting people on your side as advocates, as allies, showing them that you're capable in doing it is one of the surest ways to long term success.
Absolutely, no question. I mean, the best example I can give of that is I haven't worked for the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia. I haven't worked for them directly since 2013, but I've been to every kickoff game and Peach Bowl game ever since, pretty much free of charge, with credential, full access to everything because of what I did in the past, right? Because relationships I built in the past and the mark I left on in the past to the point where they want me there not to just, just work hard and slave and do everything, but for assurance that if something goes wrong, they know I know everything there is to know about that organization and what the standard is. And that is a huge pride point for me. That and the fact that, even though I'm not coaching as much anymore, I do some volunteer work, all my athletes still call me coach, right? And that's a huge, huge honor that I look at. And so I think it's big about, I think the biggest thing is making sure your relationships are lasting, right? Because people often forget what you did for them. They'll be like, okay, what have you done for me lately? That's a lot of what people think these days. But there's relationships and there's things that we've sat through and things we had to work through. And when you work through challenges together, that builds a relationship more than anything. You learn more when things don't go your way than you do when they're going perfectly, in my opinion.
I completely agree. Let's move to brands. And like you state, they're unlike washable tattoos. If you remember the washable tattoos that you had as a child, your brand never washes away. And I love the quote you put in by Wooden. One of my favorites is, be more concerned about your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. So let's talk a little bit about the brand and kind of going through kind of brand development, brand management, and in particular, brand protection.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're starting out and you're building your brand, it takes time, right? Because anytime there's a brand that's built, there's expectation. I always say that it's a privilege to be under pressure because pressure is just privilege wrapped in expectation. So when someone expects something from you, that's a privilege, right? We expect LeBron to perform. We expect Steph Curry to perform because of what he has done in the past or what they have done in the past. And so when it comes to the brand side of it, the brand, it goes everywhere with you. It's kind of like that thing I was talking about earlier with loss of logo, where, you know, for me as a speaker, I can't just be a speaker when I feel like it because I'm preaching these things when I'm in the grocery store, when I'm at church, when I'm out, hanging with friends. There's a level of decorum that is still expected of me, right? Because of what I talk about and what I try to embody when I'm teaching and encouraging people. And so I'm just all about the approach that the logo never comes off and how to handle yourself in different environments. So when it comes to your brand, there's three things for you. It's going to precede you, it's going to position you, it's going to protect you. It's going to enter that room before you do. Why? Because you've been Googled, you've been researched. They're going to look you up your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your TikTok. They're going to look at your resume, your references. They're going to call people that are not on your reference list. They're going to call those people that they may know. So that that precedence it sets before you is so important because most impressions now, most first impressions are made online. And there's a thing called confirmation bias to where people want to confirm what they thought to be true. So if you didn't look pleasant on your LinkedIn profile picture, you've already operating at a deficit because they expect you not to be nice. They meet you in person and you're a completely different person, but you're operating from a deficit. Think of it as someone that is trying to compete for a national championship in 1 year, but you start outside the top 25. It's going to be hard to get from 26 up to one if you were never in the first ranking poll. And so, creating opportunity for yourself, creating leverage for yourself is so important. So, that brand precedence and setting that precedent before you, so important. The next level is going to position you. How do you get out of the big stack of resumes to the short stack of resumes? Through relationships, through performance. I always say this that, you want to go from application to invitation to where it's great to apply for roles and stuff when you're starting your career. But let's say you're 5, 10, 15 years in. At some point, you should be getting recruited. People should be coming after you because they've seen and heard how well of a job you do to a point where they're asking you, what's it going to take to get you here? And when those questions ask, and when you get recruited, you're able to have some leverage. Leverage leads to negotiating power. Negotiating power leads to more money, right? So that's how kind of that natural order of operations in my mind works is going from that application, because when you apply for something, you're going to fall within the pay grades. This is the pay grades we're offering. But when you're recruited for something, like, okay, what's it going to take to get you here? You have a little bit more leverage. And then the last part of it is the brand protection. If people know what you're about, they know what you stand for, they know what you will deal with and what you will entertain and won't entertain. I personally have learned that when you're so strong in your standards, people learn to self-select in and out of your life. They learn to self-select. They're like, yeah, Charles, I ain't gonna deal with that. Charles is a good guy. He doesn't really deal with X, Y, Z. I'm not gonna bring that to him. And so when you look at what people bring to you, when they're comfortable discussing around you, you have to look in the mirror and say, I created that space for that, for them to bring that into my orbit. And so that's why I'm big on brand precedence or your brand preceding you, it positioning you, and lastly, it protecting you.
I love that three-step process. And that really concludes phase two of this, which is cultivation. So part of that is seeking out the resources to help build your career capital, allowing your leader to excel by being excellent, and then branding and blossoming, and having those three stages of branding, which then leads us into reaping the harvest, part three, which a lot of people like to skip right to. We already mentioned that's not the way things work. When you get to part three, the right way, I love the analogy or the metaphor that's used with jersey swapping, which you kind of alluded to earlier in our conversation, but perhaps you could unpack what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. People that work to build their businesses, their careers, their reputations, they come with a lot. And when they have worked to achieve a certain level of excellence, of reputational expectation, whatever it is, they're not just going to hand it off to you just because you work there, right? They're not going to just hand it off to you just because you happen to be in the building. There has to be a level of trust there and a level of, okay, you're going to represent me at a high level. I also learned this is that when you represent people well, they want to plug you in because they want to be the resource that puts you in position. It's a good feeling to know I recommended somebody great. They did a great job. Like that's a great feeling. And so now they give me more trust to know, like, okay, if I call Will and I ask him for a recommendation for this job, he's gonna give me the best people because his filter is very strong and he would never put me in a bad position for a bad hire. And so I think when you continue again, this all comes through consistency, where you earn that, when you earn that trust, then they're like, okay, I will stamp you for this. You can put me on your reference list now. Because so many people they know of you, but they don't know you, but they want your reference. They want your stamp of approval to get X, Y, G, Z job or promotion, whatever it is. But it's like, hey man, I can't put my brand on everybody. I just can't do it. That happened to me a few months ago. Someone asked me about an opportunity and I was like, man, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to support this, with my name and my brand because there's some things that you've done in the past where you haven't represented yourself the best way. And that's not my fault, to be honest with you, to be candid. And so that's why, I'm very big on accountability and doing things the right way, but you have to make sure that you're positioning yourself to where people want to support you, because that's the human condition, is to be in community, to support, to do things for other people. And good people, I think, believe this and think that way. But if they don't see, value, if they think that their reputation could be damaged, it could hurt their career. We have to understand these people are trying to support themselves, their families. They can't afford to make a mistake by recommending someone that's bad or someone that does something that's egregious or something that they can't afford it. And so I just take a lot of pride in that, and other people should too, because people have worked hard to get where they are. And that jersey swap, it usually comes with a level of equanimity in a sense, because when you see people swapping jerseys on whether it be the NFL or NBA, there's relationship there. There's typically relationship. There's not something that's sanctioned by the NFL. You have to give someone your jersey. That's not anywhere. There's a relationship there. There's trust there, and there's like, hey, I respect your performance. I respect what you've done to get here. You respect what I've done to get here. Let's swap, right? Because I see equal value in what you've done and vice versa. And so that's why I think the jersey swap comes into play.
I think a great question to ask yourself is, do you have anyone in your network who would let you wear his or her jersey? Do you have someone of clout allowing you to parade around in a jersey with their name on the back of it, clearly representing him or her wherever you go? Hopefully you are. Hopefully you built that brand, that reputation, that character, or you have certain individuals that are willing to do that. But also, I think it's important to realize that everyone that you're going to meet is not interested in your professional or personal development. That's just a cold, hard fact, no matter how much you wish they were. So it's imperative to find those that are and nurture those relationships so that you can build upon those, and they're going to connect you with twice, three times, four times the number of people through uncultivated relationships that you're trying to gain, or through even cold calling, right?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, it's just one of those things where when people, know who you are and know what you represent, they want to put you in that position like I talked about earlier. And there are gonna be people, if I'm being honest with you, some people are just selfish. I would think there's two types of leaders. Those are in legacy mode and those that are in survival mode. Right. I've seen highly paid leaders that are in survival mode. I mean, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they're in survival mode because they still feel inadequate within themselves. I've met other leaders who don't have the highest title, making a lot less money, but they're still trying to develop people. They're trying to lift as they climb, right? And so title and compensation has nothing to do with your character as a person, and you want to build other people up around you. And so I think it's good to realize it's like, hey, may admire this person, what they've accomplished and what they've done, but they may not see value in helping you. And that happens. Like that doesn't may not be an indictment on you or an indictment on them. Some things are just not a fit sometimes. And you have to realize that, and you got to move forward. And you can't just judge or assess or assign value to people just because of what they do and what their title is. Right. Because I've met people that are low on the totem pole that are great people. I've met people that are high on the totem pole that are not so great people. And so I think having that level of discernment and that realization that, hey, okay, they may be in a position of power, but do they have influence? Power and influence can be synonymous. They can also be very different. I know people that have had the power, but they allow their number two or number three person for the actual influence because they have a high likability factor. So that's what I think that comes from when you think about how that can help you and benefit your career. You choose who chooses you, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, yeah, like you said, you also, though, want to find those influential people. You want to walk with the elephants, which can be rephrased as, in order to be successful, you need to be around successful people. So, are there any tips, tools, strategies that you can give us that would help our listeners to identify, well, maybe not even identify those, but try to identify them and to try to bring them into their circles so they can spend more time with them?
I would say this: when you enter these certain rooms, you go into different events, you go to different conferences and seminars, look to see who's always in the same rooms, right? For instance, as a speaker, I work with a lot of athletes. When I see a student athlete in more than one event that's highly selective, that requires an application and selection process, I'm like, okay, yep, he's different, she's a little different. Okay. So I think people that keep showing up on your LinkedIn feed, keep showing up in different conversations. You need to connect with Brian, you need to connect with Charles, people that keep coming up, that keep showing up. And those people are ones that have created a level of influence to where people gravitate towards them, right? They respect them. And so I think that's going to be very, very important for you because, again, it's not about title and money. It's about people that have the influence and have the trust, right, to of people to where if they say something or they give a recommendation, people move. Like the energy shifts. Like, oh, so and so called. And I'll give you an example. I applied for a job at the Peach Bowl one year. I'm sorry, my internship year. And when I got to the organization, my colleague did some searching and snooping and found a folder called Friends of the Family. And in that folder, it had my name in it and the email chain about me. And originally, they were going to give me a phone interview and send me on my way. And then an elephant came stomping in. Jameel Northcutt, who I connected with at Ole Miss as an undergrad student, and I could see with a chain where it shifted. And it said they were talking back and forth on my behalf. They were like, hey, Jameel Northcutt just called about Will Baggett. Let's give him a second look. Right. And that's how I got my job at the Peach Bowl, if I'm being totally honest with you. This is coming from someone that, had graduated magna cum laude, GPA, sky high, done great things and try to, volunteer and do different things and extracurricular activities. Still wasn't enough. I needed an elephant to support me to get me through that door.
I think that's so critical in building that network of influential people. And really, the great leaders, they're competitive. All great leaders are competitive, but they're also compassionate. And I think an important part here to leave to end our interview on is I love the final piece of your framework is raise as you rise by reaching back and pulling up the next person, because that's what great leaders do.
Absolutely. It just has to be a personal standard to where you got to care about that person beside you. And one quote I always love, they said, the quote goes, they don't put championship rings on smooth hands, right? And so your hands may not be smooth, right? When you are climbing that career ladder or you're reaching back to pull that person up, your hands might get some calluses, you may get rubbed, may get some scratches here and there, but ultimately it'll be all be worth it because if you only find happiness and find a sense of gratitude and just excitement in what you do, I think that can be very fleeting. A lot of what people do is based on altruism and what drives them, in my opinion. And so when you can watch somebody that you have helped, that you have helped position, that you've encouraged, you see them growing, and you see the pride they get from that. It's like another parent, right? In a way, because I've heard people to say that, I've had, butt whippings and things like that, but nothing hurt me more than seeing my mom or dad disappointed, right? Conversely, nothing makes me happier than seeing my mom or dad happy. And so for me personally, I kind of give this quick story. My dad barely passed high school algebra. He in fact paid his algebra teacher $60 to pass him in algebra so he could graduate and marry my mom, or else I probably wouldn't be here. That's a true story. But when you think about, there's a level of, I call it kind of the three C's, and its capacity is one of them. Understanding your capacity, and he may have reached his capacity. I wasn't there. I don't know. I'm not sure. But when me and my brothers came along, my brother became a science, guru, math and science guru, and got on a full scholarship to college off math and science. I in seventh grade had the highest pre-algebra average of anybody in my entire seventh grade class across the whole school, and imagine the pride my dad saw, right? And understanding that, okay, I may not achieve this, but I didn't let my son dip below his capacity, right? And so having that courage, understanding your capacity, and being consistent, I think are just very, very important. So I think if you're going to be a great leader, you got to be someone that cares about other people deeply. Because you can read every leadership book on the planet. There's 100,000 of them, probably more. If at some level you don't get that it's all about caring about people, then you're reading the wrong book. I just don't. If I look at everything I read about leadership, everything I've experienced, everything I can build, if I pull it down to one word, it's about care. Do you care about other people? And so raise as you rise, lift as you climb. Because for me, my approach has been always this: like, hey, when I get to the mountaintop, and it's proverbial mountaintop because we never truly arrive, in my opinion. It's always a constant journey, but I don't want to be there by myself. All right. I don't want to be, well off and miserable. I want people to be alongside me to say, hey, we did it. Right. Not I did it, but we did it.
Oh, well said. And I remember an interview with Mike Krzyzewski, the former Duke coach, and An interviewer asked him, said, "So what does caring and character have to do with winning games?" And Mike said, "Nothing." But he said it has everything to do with winning championships. So it's so important for leadership, so important for people to recognize that, especially when they're starting their career. And if you want to be a great leader, these are core values that you should strive for each and every day. Thank you, Will, for joining me today. Before we end our interview, I always like to have that one final question. What's the first thing that new leaders should do to build this strong foundation that they can do right away?
I would say the first thing you have to do is the three I's. Understand introspection. Look deeply to understand who you are, what you care about, and who you want to serve and how you want to leave a legacy. The second thing is iteration. Understand how to bring different versions of yourself to different people. You don't have a one size fits all approach. A players and B players may not get along. You got to know how to manage and how to lead all of them, right, to the excellence and to the next level they seek. And the third thing I think is going to be influence, having a positive influence on other people and what you want to see from them. But I think the first thing you have to do is introspection. You got to know who you are more than anything, and that only comes from sitting and spending time with yourself. And one of my favorite quotes came from Basquiat, and it said that most of humanity's problems come from a person's inability to sit in the room by himself for 30 minutes in quiet silence. And I think oftentimes we get so bogged down into what we see on our phones and our screen time and things of that sort, to where if everyone's thinking the same, then someone's not thinking. So spend some time alone, do a personal retreat, get to know who you are and what you care about, and you'll find out more about yourself than a leader than you ever imagined.
I love that. Love that quote by Pascal as well, one of my favorites as well. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm everywhere, every platform as Will Baggett. That's two G's and two T's. On social media, it's Bag Baggtalk, and I'm easy to find. So yeah, if you type in Will Baggett, you'll see a guy with a pretty big head. That's me, and I'd love to reach out and connect with anybody who's interested or just wants to talk greatness. It's always a fun and always a pleasure. And Charles, thank you for just creating this opportunity, this platform, just for me to be able to share my story. I think it takes a great deal of humility to let people talk about themselves for an extended amount of time. And so I just want to just give you your flowers and say thank you.
Thank you, Will, and thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.